Kia ora guys, my name is Alex Tilford, and today we have a new tutorial on how to do some post-processing effects on your 3D models. So here's an image that I posted a couple of days ago, and I had a few people ask me, what material setups am I using, how am I getting this post-processed effect? And it's actually really easy. So I'm going to do a quick demo, quick little walkthrough of how I go about setting up this image. Now I'm going to try and keep this as generic as possible. If you are from Blender, 3ds Max, Maya, Cinema 4D, any one of those software, you'll be able to follow along just fine. Just bear in mind that a few settings might be a little bit different for you. Alright, so let's get started. Right, first off, why would we want to use these post-processed effects? Why can't we just upload a screenshot of our model? Well, this is fairly straightforward. A screenshot of your model sucks. It doesn't show off all of the details. Well, it shows the details, but it's just not that pretty. So for example, if I just open up the file here, if we go ahead and set this here to only render, this is what it would look like. Even if I turned on high quality mode, GLSL lighting and all that kind of stuff, it's still not going to look fantastic. We can see it, but it's not that great. And I see a lot of models like this. People just give a screenshot of their model, they don't bother rendering or anything like that, and it just holds you back. It doesn't appeal to any prospective employers. We really want to get some nice looking renders out. So that's what we're about to jump into. Alright, so we're going to break this up into two parts. There is the 3D side of things, and there's the post side of things. In 3D, what we need to focus on is our materials. How are we going to put some materials on our objects that aren't going to take a lot of time to set up, but still look really nice. Lighting. How should we light our model? Should we go for some big dramatic lighting? Should we keep it simple? And rendering. What layers do we need? What different effects do we need to get out of our render engine before we take it into comp? And then we come to the post side of things. Now, when it comes to the post side, I like to break it into several groups. We have the base. Now the base, this is any major changes such as manual painting and tweaks. Say you've forgotten to add in a rivet and it looks out of place, you can just paint in that rivet. That's perfectly fine. You might want to add in any extra occlusion, any shadows if you're using a shadow map. Also, you can add in extra lighting if you've rendered out a normal pass. Then we get to the grading. Now the grading, this is anything that affects the color or luminosity, also known as brightness. So this is your color correction. This is any gradient overlays. So we're going to be showing you a few cool effects for gradient overlays to get some sort of noisy patterns going on. And also gamma correction, which is an important one. If we're working in a linear workflow and we've rendered out non-gamma corrected materials, then you will need to correct that. So Maya is not in linear mode by default. It's default set to sRGB. You'll need to change that to linear to get that into linear. Blender, on the other hand, is in linear by default, so you will need to do gamma correction. Alright, next we move on to grunge. Now grunge maps, these can be applied to make this scene feel more gritty, more old, if you're doing some old cameras, or in this case some mechs need to have a bit of dirt in there. Or you can even make them feel romantic if you have some of those effects going on. So, the pink and purple sort of, it's kind of along the lines of bokeh from your depth of field, but for the camera lens. So it's bokeh that's created on the lens itself, if that makes any sense. We're not going to be covering romantic because we're doing a mech, but if you want to learn more about that, there's plenty of resources online. Then we move on to the lens. So the lens effects, we use them to draw focus and make the image feel more photographic. So we'll be using vignette, distortion, so your standard lens distortion, and chromatic aberration. So in this example, I've used vignette. I have not used any distortion because I don't require it, or chromatic aberration, but I will be showing you guys how to use those. Okay, so now that we've got all the theory behind it out of the way, I'm going to jump into Blender now, and you guys can follow along if you like. Now, if you want to use this same model, I currently have it online, so you can get it from here, facebook.com/unitycookie. Currently, I am doing a little bit of a competition for Unity Cookie on Facebook, where we're taking this model and we're going to basically make it low poly for games. So if you want to grab this file, jump over there now. If you're watching this beyond the 2nd of January or whatever day it is today, you might have to scroll down the page a little. Alright, so let's jump over into Blender. So I have a simple scene set up here. In the scene, we have our mech, we have a camera, and we have an infinite background. So let's step through each of these. First off, we're going to start with the mech. This is a very simple mech. It's something that I only spent a couple of hours making. It was a speed model, of course. And with this, what we want to do is show off every angle of our model. Because you guys are fantastic modelists. You want to show it off. You don't want to, do one single angle and that's all you get if you've spent hours working on the backside of it. Now, if you do want to do only one side, it is a good idea to pose your model. But in this case, we're not working with poses. We're just going to work with models. So just a modeling point of view. Right, to show off both of these models, or this model here from both angles, all we do is we take our camera, we move it slightly to the side so that we're getting a almost 3/4 angle here, and we duplicate the model and rotate it 180 degrees so that we can see the back of it. So we've got front and back, and this is quite nice. Let's show off all of our detail. Alright, now, bit of a note with the camera. If we grab our camera here, if you have your camera angled down at your model, you're going to make your model feel small and fragile. So if you've modeled a small girl, or if you have modeled, let's say, something that's a little weaker, something that is not a menacing creature, so perhaps it's a cute or adorable thing, then you're going to want to have your model either looking down or straight on. In this case, I wanted this to feel a little larger because this thing is probably about 4 or 5 meters tall. I'll probably go with about 4 meters tall actually. So what we do is we want to have our camera facing up. Now, not too far. If you have it looking away up from down here, then it's going to feel a little too large. You're going to lose some of that detail that you've put onto the top. So something that is, slightly off to one side, looking slightly up, is really going to suit our purposes here. Alright, so that's our camera and our models. Next we have the infinite background. So this is something that I throw into a lot of my scenes because it is very, very handy. All it is we have a plane that curves up. So just to demonstrate how this works, we start with a few of these. we can do is we can extrude this out, extrude this up, and then grab this one in the middle and then just bevel it. And you also might want to stretch it out a little. And that's as easy as that. So that's how you get a infinite backdrop. Just a moment while it loads. Alright. Okay, so with that there sorted, let's go ahead and talk about materials. So you can see we've got materials, lighting, and rendering. These are the three things I want to cover outside of the scene that I've just done. So over onto the materials, you can see I have a very simple material setup. I've taken a Lambert 1, I've gone ahead and made it I've made it glossy. So this is a glossy BSDF shader. And I've set the roughness to 0.3 and the color to a 50% gray. Now if you are following along in 3ds Max or Maya, for your shader setup, grab a mere material X and you want to set the glossiness to a value of about 30%, and your reflections, use a BRDF, so reflectivity at 1, and set the 0° reflections to 0 and your 90° reflections to a value of about 0.5 or 0.6, and that will replicate the shader we've got here. So very, very simple on the material side of things. All we want is a flat grey that's a little bit reflective. Now the reason we want it a little bit reflective is so that it will take in some of the environment around it. So some of the pieces that are next to it are going to be showing up slightly in those reflections, which really will sort of boost that feeling. It'll accent your details. Alright, so that's materials covered. If we just jump over to the world settings, I want to talk about lighting. Now lighting, you can go all out with a full-on lighting setup. I have done that to showcase some of my models, but in the end, you can settle for a physical sun and sky. So you can see here, I've got surface set to background. The color is set to sky texture, which is also known as a physical sun and sky. I've just got it set to coming sort of partially down. It's not midday, it's not morning, it's not night, it's just a standard sun direction. I've turned up the turbidity a little, so just made it a little bit more atmosphere in it, a little bit more blue. We're going to be cutting out the colors anyways, but that just helps to accent your luminosity a little. And in the strength, I've bumped up the strength because it was a little bit dark. So this is very dependent on the size of your scene, how strong you want that sky to be. And that's basically that. So that's our materials and our lighting covered. What we're going to move on to now is rendering. So rendering is pretty easy. I've pretty much left it at this exact same default settings, apart from I've changed my resolution to Full HD 100%. So by default it's at 50% Full HD. I've also come down to render layers, and what we want to do is render out a Z-depth pass, an object index pass, which I'm going to talk about in a moment, and an ambient occlusion pass. So the Z-depth will allow us to add a little bit of environment fog, not depth of field. I don't recommend having depth of field on your model showcase, as it will cut out a lot of those details. So you can have your background, if you've got a background, you can have that blurred out, but you really want the vast majority of your details to be in focus so that they can be seen. If you have to blur out your details, you might want to spend a little bit more time modeling them. You really just want to show all of your model. Alright, so talking about the Z depth, if I just go ahead and turn off only render, you can see I've got this little yellow cross. Now on my camera here, I've got limits turned on so I can see where it is, and I've got my focus set to be that cube. So you can delete out this here and set this manually if you prefer. But all it's doing is saying, I want the Z depth to start from here, and we'll take it out either side from there. So it's pretty straightforward. That's just something to bear in mind. You probably want to set your focus so that you can get a better depth, a better Z depth pass. All right. So back here, I want to talk about object index. So if I select the ground plane here, I've put a pass index of 1. So everything else is going to be set to 0 by default, and this one here is set to 1. So we'll have a mask of our two little mechs here. And that is very handy in compositing, because it allows us to treat the ground, the environment, and our models themselves independently. Okay, if you are using 3ds Max or Maya, you will find that it's not called a object index or material index. It's called a, oh gosh, it's been a while since I've used Maya for that. Pass and no, not pass, ID mask. I'm not sure, but you get what I mean, anyways. All right. So that's that there sorted. So once you've set all that up, hit render, and you'll get, if I just go over to the node editor, so I've set up a few things here. All right, so you're going to get something like this. So it doesn't look that great. It's we've got, there's a bit of shading there, problems there. We can see I haven't set this up correctly, and it's triangulated a bit weird. We have, everything's very blue, but the luminosity values are there, and it will suit our purposes nicely. So don't worry if you get a render out like this. We are going to deal with it. Alright, so what you need to do now is, if you're using 3ds Max or Maya, you can just skip this part, head straight into Photoshop. For Blender users, we need to split these out into textures. So we can ignore the alpha, because we don't have any alpha. Occlusion, that's pretty straightforward. Just connect it up to that viewer node or compositor and save it out. The Z depth, what you want to do is connect this through a map value and just change that size to something low. You can see I've used a 0.025. By default it's set to 1, which you can't see anything. So 0.025 will bring that in. And minimum and maximum don't really do much, but they will stop extreme values from appearing. So that's pretty straightforward to get that depth pass in. Next, you want to grab your ID mask. Now for the ID mask, make sure that anti-aliasing is on, and just set it to 0, which means it's going to have white for everything except for the background. Now you will notice that there is occasionally, if you're using the cycles renderer, there is bits like this where there's a little dot that hasn't been ray traced. There we go. Just ignore those. They are not really going to show up at all. If it does, then you can just paint it out. Alright, so that is it. So once you've got all those images, we can head into Photoshop. So jumping into Photoshop now, I'm going to jump over to this render file, and I'm just going to remove a whole bunch of layers. There we go. And I'm also going to bring this over so you can see it. Okay, so you can see I have split this up already. We have, we've got base, grade, grunge, and lens. So I'm going to step through these. Instead of doing it all from scratch, I'm just going to step through what I've done and show you how they work and how they integrate with each other. just because it's a little bit faster, and I don't want to have a whole, hour and a half long tutorial on just doing a simple grade. I mean, we are 20 minutes in and we haven't even started grading yet, which is what this tutorial is on. Okay, so with this all set up, what we need to do is start layering things together. So we're going to start off in the base. Now, if you remember from over here, the base is any major changes such as manual paint tweaks, extra occlusion, or shadows and lighting. So in this case, what we have is first, I have desaturated it. So we have a hue and saturation with the saturation set to 0. This is because I don't want any of that color information. So usually you put this in the grade. I accidentally had it before I did my manual paint, which is why it's stuck there now. So yeah, desaturate, get rid of all that blue. We don't want it. We're going to paint in our colors manually. Alright, now occlusion. Sometimes you just want to boost up that occlusion value. So this is pretty straightforward. I have the ambient occlusion, and I've set that to multiply at roughly 30%. So you can see I used 30% there, or 32%, and it just helps boost up that occlusion a little. Next up, we have a few little issues to deal with. So if you look here, we have this area where I have an n-gon here. This was a speed model, so I didn't worry about any little, I didn't worry about triangles, n-gons or anything. I just modeled. And sometimes you get these issues. That's fine. You can just paint them out in post. There's also errors like here, where I've actually removed that insert there so that you can see how that gets painted in. And just to quickly demonstrate how this all works, let's go ahead and do some painting. Grab your clone stamp brush, set the sample to current and below, and what we're going to do is grab this piece, just from there, zoom in, and then we just paint it in. Just like that. You can come in and do some manual painting through here if you like. If you like to accent the top there, and it's pretty straightforward. That's how you do that. So you can see the difference that we've got. If we just paint that out a little between this one here and that one. So you can paint in little details like that. There's also things like you can see these are faceted. I forgot to hit smooth. There is that one there, of course. And just painting them out, just roughly, you can see it fixes all of those up. Okay, so that's the base done. So the base is just, any extra occlusion that we've got there. We did that desaturate, which is technically a grade, but you get how that works. And we did a bit of manual painting to correct some of those pieces there. So that's the base. Alright, so once you've done that base, what you need to do is move on to the grading. Alright, so I'm going to show you a few cool effects that you can get going on here. First off, we're going to talk about gamma correction. Now this is very easy. You add in an exposure node, exposure layer, sorry, and change it to 1.6 or 2.2. I found 2.2 was a little bit bright, so I used a 1.6. And all that does is just brightens up the mid values. So it'll keep your darks, it'll keep your highlights, anything in between gets brighter with a curve that looks. Add in a new layer here. Curve that looks like that. So if you have a graph, 0 to 1, shadows, highlights, it's just bringing up all of those mid values. So that's a linear workflow there. It's a good thing to research. If you don't know what linear workflow is, Google it. Very, very good to get into. Alright, next up, what we've done is we have a depth pass set to screen. which does not a whole lot. Got that set to 100%, and you can see it's not, you wouldn't think that this is 100%, but what I've actually got is I've got some blend mode set in. So you can see under your blending options, we have some blend ifs. So if I just take them right back, this is what you get when you set your Z depth to screen. You get this bright foreground and your dark background, or flipped if you have it reversed around the other way. And it's not, it's a little bit more blown out than what I would like. But what we can do is we can change around these blends, which is going to be more apparent if I take this into a little ribbon. All right, there we go. So what these do is these are basically going, if this layer is less than this dark, don't let it just, erase it. If it's brighter than this value, erase it. We only want the stuff in the middle. So you can get a nice strip through scene like that. So this works well, but there is something cool you can do. If we move that back and Alt click on it, so hold Alt or Command if you're on a Mac, and drag this over, we get a nice blend. So it's going to blend 0 over here and 1 over here. So it's very much more procedural fall off. And we can do that the same over on this one. Or we can take that back however you like. So that's how that one there works. Alright, so there's just adding a little bit more depth to the scene. What we're going to do now is we're going to add in some color. So if I turn on my color here, you can see I have the mech on the left is sort of a bluey purple, and the mech on the right is a sort of a greeny color. So if I just disable this layer mask so that we can see the whole effect, if we just go into blending options, all I have is a gradient overlay. I've also got this this effect set here. We just turn that back. Alright, so if we turn this right back to just the gradient, we get this effect. So a few people were actually a little confused by this. They're like, what gradient am I using? How do I get this sort of noisy pattern? All it is I've got set your direction, set your scale. So scale's quite important. I've changed this blend mode to multiply, which doesn't really do anything because we're using blend modes. And all we do is in the gradient editor, instead of choosing solid, we choose noise. And you can click randomize. You can change up how this looks until you get something that you like. So you go through and find a cool one. So something like this. It's looking pretty cool. You can change around how many colors are used. How saturated it is, and how bright it is. It's pretty straightforward. So once that's set, you just jump back into your blending options and you blend these around. So you can say this layer ones, by the way, won't do anything. It's, unfortunately, this layer is tied to the color of the input image, not tied to your layer styles here. However, the underlying one will work just fine. So you can see if we bring this across, this dark bits will start showing through. If we bring this across here, all the light will start showing through. And you can blend this through and you can kind of see what effect we're getting there. So with this example now, we have a lot more red in the scene. So it's pretty straightforward. We've got these gradient overlays. We can now just go through and randomize this. Get something a bit more like that. Or let's say we want this to be more saturated. We want this to be only reds and orange. Oops, not bevel and emboss. We can change around where these are affected. Like so. And then when we're done, we can hit OK, and we can use the Z-depth as a layer mask, and it will just change where that's applied. So we want this to be more in the foreground, less in the background, so it's just coloring our mix. So I've got this one here to a blue and a green, just comes through by chance really. And that's how that one works. So if you're a little confused about that noisy gradient or the whole blend ifs, there is a lot of resources online, or you can ask me and I'll be happy to do my best to answer any of your questions there. Right, moving on, I have this colorize, which only affects the background. So this one here, I've gone ahead and I've done a hue saturation set to colorize. So if I just go ahead and reset this to defaults, if we go ahead and choose colorize, it's going to make things red by default. And what I did is I wanted this to be more of a blue, so roughly 250, a lot more desaturated than that, and I also made it quite a bit darker. Maybe something like this. Yeah, there we go. So something about there. And this effect will also give you a nice outline. So if I just go ahead and delete that layer mask, so let's say we've just done this to the whole scene. If we go ahead and grab our mask, so I've just made a selection, you can do that by, let's see what we've got, all set to 0. Alright, so if we delete that layer mask, what we've got is we've got these two mix. You just go over to channels, control click on channel, add it to that mask, and then hide it. And that way you've always got it to select when you need it. Alright, now if we go ahead and apply this mask, and invert that. Alright, that's all nice. It it just affects the background. But what I really want is I want to have a nice little rim around our objects here. But I want this rim to be affected by this, this grade here. So we're already making it darker. We want to make it, tinted slightly blue, so it blends in with the background a little. So the easiest way to do this is we just make a selection there. We go to select, modify, expand by 1 pixel, and we just fill that. Is it? Nope. Yeah, it's Alt Delete. We'll fill that with white, and it'll just give us, a little bit of a rim, just this 1 pixel rim that blends in with the background. So it's effectively the background's being multiplied over your robots, and it just makes it stand out. It makes your mix just pop that a little bit more. So that's what this one here is doing. It's a really nice effect. So it's just affecting the background and giving us a little bit of a border here. Now if you wanted to, let's say you didn't want the rim controlled through there, but you wanted it controlled through another one, if we just go ahead and add in a, let's just go for a hue and saturation. Let's delete that layer mask. If we control click on this again, and we go filter, modify, and border, we do a border of 1 pixel, and add in a layer mask. So we can now go ahead and darken this up. And we can also get in our outlines this way. However, it won't be blended with the environment. So if we go ahead and put this one here back on, expand by 1 pixel. Alright, so you can see I have a subtle one here which you can't really see up the top, where it's blending in a little bit smoother, but it's quite strong through here and it's not so strong down the bottom. However, this one here is very strong the entire way around. So it's something to bear in mind with those two techniques, but there you go, you can use both of them to your liking. So I'm going to turn that one off because I don't really like that one. Next up, we have black and white. So this one here, what I'm doing is I'm sucking out the color of that mech in the background. So you can see the mask here. If we just go ahead and delete mask, just so I can show you how it works. So I've got a black and white here, which is currently affecting the entire scene. If we go ahead and take a selection of our Z depth, which I made that selection by the same method that I showed you for that mask. If we add in that selection there, we can then go through with a white to transparent gradient, and we can just paint back in that color. Actually, that's the wrong way around. We want this one. Here we go. Alright, so something like that. So that's what that one's doing. Just getting rid of a bit of that color off the one in the background. So we want to focus more on this one in the foreground. And that's grading done. So yeah, it's taken a little while, but we've gone through. As you can see, there's really not that much to it. Most of the times, because I'm explaining everything, make sure you guys actually understand what's going on behind this. Alright, so once we've finished the grade, that's where we come to grunge. Now, grunge is very important to break up the scene a little. So with grunge on, you can see it looks like this, and grunge off looks like that. So we have here a couple of dirt maps. Now, dirt maps are all over the place. If we just go to open, I think it's in here, there we go. Alright, so if I just open those two up, you can see we have these little speckles. So this is a concrete, I believe. And this one here is another concrete as well. Concrete makes a really nice grunge because grunge appears on concrete quite often. These two are from the 3D Total collection, DVD 17, I think. I'm not sure, but you can find them on CG Textures as well. And all we've done here is, if I just go clear layer style on both of these, clear layer style. Okay, so I've grabbed these, and what we do is multiply these over the top. So you can see this one here to multiply, and this one here we're going to go into blending options. We're going to grab our blend ifs, and we're just going to blend those around a little. We're just worried about this layer ones. If it's still too dark, just bring up those. It's a little too light, bring up those. Alright, so something like that. And it just adds a little bit of dirt speckles to your scene. Next, we want to have an overall grunge. So this is our sort of fine, big bits of dirt. This one here is a overall. So we've got this grunge. We just go into blending options. We're going to set that blend mode to soft light. And we're just going to move around these again. Something like this. We can bring down that opacity a little. And we have grunge. That's grunge. And that's done. So it's pretty straightforward using blend diffs, using soft light or multiply. Soft light will take your darks and your highlights, so it's sort of like a multiply and a screen, but softer. And multiply will just, add on your darker color, so it'll subtract. Alright, next we get into lens effects. So fairly straightforward. I have a vignette. I put vignettes on everything. Put that to 100%. This is our vignette. Set that to multiply, and it will just give a bit of darkness around the edges, which is nice and sweet. Also, if we just create a new layer here, I'm just going to turn off that vignette temporarily. If we go to image, apply image, I'm just going to show you how to create a few of the other lens effects. So I'm going to go into filter, lens correction, and if we go over to custom, we can do things like add in distortion, depending on your needs. Don't go all out. If you go do something big, it's just going to look weird. You generally want to go no more than about 5. So for this case, I'm going to go, let's just throw on a 0.5, which is just going to be a subtle bulge in the center. Chromatic aberration. Now, chromatic aberration is a bit of a funny one. What we do is we make one large, one small, and the other stays in the middle, depending on which one you want. So in this case, I'm going to leave blue in the middle, I think, because there seems to be a lot of blue in the scene, and just max out the other two, and you can see the effect that's happening around those edges, especially around these corners here. So if we, for example, use blue and magenta, get that effect, switch them around. Just have a play, see what you like. So I'm going to tone that effect down, and you can do something like this, and you can also go ahead and add in a bit of vignette. So you can see strong vignette, light vignette. Vignettes best when they are subtle. So just add in a little bit of that, click OK, and you can see the difference that it makes. So this may or may not be what you like. For this example, I just chose to go with a simple vignette. I didn't want any lens effects on there, just a vignette was fine. And that's it. So all I did after that was I went ahead and added some text to it. So I'm sure you guys know how to do text, use the text tool. For this one here, it is sometimes cool just to put some faded text in the background. See, I've set that to 46% with a fill of 4. So this is just a black that I have faded out. Turning off the fill means that it will only use your effects. So we've got inner shadow there. You could use a stroke instead if you liked, but yeah, it depends what you feel like doing. You can also grab the selection here if you want, invert that selection, and you can create a mask for your grunge, and no grunge will appear in this piece here, which can be really cool for military cutouts. And yeah, that is it. That concludes this short, well, it's not really short, it's a 45-minute tutorial. I hope you guys learned something. I hope you guys can really see how things go with this now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to leave a link to where you can download this model. I'm also going to give you guys this Photoshop file so that you can have a play. Got some little bits of instructions there. And yeah, so that concludes everything. So just to recap, in 3D, we want to set up some flat materials, just grey materials. We don't care about color. Lighting, once again, we don't care about color. We just want to have a prominent direction of light, and just even cloudy day kind lighting. Rendering, make sure that you render out your occlusion pass and your Z depth. They are very handy for when you're blending things together. And of course your beauty pass is the prime one you're going to be using. And when it comes to post-production, you want to split things up into your base, your grade, your grunge, and your lens. So once again, the base is any changes such as manually painting in any gaps or anything that you forgot to do in 3D. Don't bother re-rendering, just paint it in. Any extra occlusion, there's also any extra shadows or lighting that you may want to use. Those are all considered your base, sort of like a base coat. Next, you move on to your grade. So any color correction you want, color grading. We use those gradient overlays, those blend ifs. So blend if this is between this color range or luminosity range. And also gamma correction if you're using linear workflow. Now, if you're not sure what linear workflow is, make sure you go ahead and Google it. There are some great resources out there for it. Alright, so grunge, move on to grunge. If you are not doing anything that should look grungy, don't use grunge. If you are doing a rendering of a little girl and you've modeled it and it's looking cool, you probably don't want to put any grunge on it because that's going to make it look a bit more dirty. You might, you know, if it's a little girl from a dirty environment, such as a back alley kind of thing, or a orphanage, then by all means, grunge will work. If it's a little girl on, she's at a play party or whatever, grunge isn't going to work too well for you there. Alright, so then you go ahead and finish off with lens. So lens is pretty much your final touches, making things look like it was taken with an actual camera. So that's your vignette, your lens distortion, and your chromatic aberration. So very, very subtle. Don't go over the top with your lens correction. If I see anyone having extreme chromatic aberration on everything, I'm gonna a bit of a yell at you because it is horrible. Chromatic aberration is nice in small quantities. I can pretty much guarantee you will not get a job if you have really strong chromatic aberration on all of your models. It's not good. Just to quickly go over, we've got a few minutes left. The reason why some of these occur. So, vignette, this occurred in old cameras because less light got there, so the corners of the photos were darker. We still try and create that effect because it brings in the attention to the center. Don't overuse it. Don't have it too strong. Lens distortion. Every camera has lens distortion. That's why you saw me use the value of 0.5. A good camera, a good like a 60D or something, it's going to have lens distortion of around 0.5, 1, probably even less. Very, very slight lens distortion. Professional photographers will reverse that lens distortion to get a flat image. If you want to have a professional image, often don't use lens distortion. But sometimes it can be good to use that effect, such as anything like if you've modeled a fish or a underwater creature or a space creature. Yes, a lens distortion of a value of maybe 4 or even 5 is that's something that is applicable. Chromatic aberration. This is an effect that is sort of like how light works when you take a photo. So when you take a photo, the light has this effect with your lens, and it sort of blurs out the 2 of the 3 color channels, away from each other, and especially around highlights. So if you're taking a photo of a building, often you see a bit of chromatic aberration right at that highlight point because your camera can't quite figure out what it's doing with those colors. In the sense, that's not exactly how it works, but it's an easier way to explain it. So if you have really bright highlights and deep shadows in your scene, then chromatic aberration certainly can help to exaggerate that, especially exterior things or bright metal. Chromatic aberration can help you with that. But for a scene like this little mech here, I would not use more than perhaps a 5% chromatic aberration. It's it's not something that you want to have on your models. So, yeah, if you know how chromatic aberration works, you are free to use it. If you don't, probably best to stay away from it. So this is it's a very long, almost an hour-long tutorial on how to create some post-processing for your models. But when you think about it, it's not that hard. There isn't that much to it. I've just sort of drawn this out to make it a little more easier. Alright, so that's it for today. My name is Alex Tilford, and have a nice day.